Well, this is a video on some more information on fractions, and this video is about how to do fraction problems that speak of a fraction of an amount. So these questions are talking about a fraction of some amount. This makes it different than questions that are talking about 3.5 inches, because the half there is telling me how many inches. But this is talking about half of an amount. So here's a couple of questions that we can look at in this video to tell you what I mean. So the question on the yellow sticky note says, I have 12 eggs. I have used half of them. How many did I use? There's my fraction. My fraction's showing up as a word right now, but you and I both know that's the fraction 1/2. And notice that the wording is saying I have half of the 12 eggs. That's what I mean by a fraction of an amount. A fraction of an amount. Some people will say there's kind of a pattern or a rule that whenever you have a fraction and then the word of, that it sometimes means multiply. And take 1/2 and multiply it by 12. And in this case that works. If you use your calculator and do 1/2 times 12, you'll get the answer. But rules and tricks, like I wouldn't call it a trick, but rules or look for this and do this sort of thing, it works as long as I remember it. But that's if I can remember the concept that's going on in the question and really understand it, then I can apply it to all sorts of different kinds of questions, and I'm less likely to forget it if I understand the concept deeply rather than simply understand one little trick or one little rule. So let me explain the concept here. First of all, a lot of you could probably answer this question, give me the answer correctly, without having to dive too deep. You probably would say, well, if you're asking me for half of 12, I know that that's got to be 6. If they use half the 12 eggs, then I've used 6. So there's the answer. The answer is 6. But let's look now at why that works, why that answer comes out. If you look at the fraction 1/2, you might have looked at the previous videos where we talked about the meaning of a fraction. And there we talked about that the top has a name, the bottom has a name, but more importantly now I'm talking about the meaning of the top and the meaning of the bottom. The bottom always tells me how many equal parts in the, well, I'm going to put in one whole. And the top tells me how many parts how many parts I'm talking about. That's the best way to say it. Makes it pretty general. How many parts I'm talking about. So when we say a half of 12, the whole bundle of eggs that I've got here is 12 eggs. That's the whole pile, the whole bunch of eggs. 12 eggs is the whole. The 2 on the bottom of the fraction here of 1/2 is saying, take that bundle of 12 eggs and break it into 2 equal parts. So I'm just going to add another slide here. Okay, here we go. So if I've got my 12 eggs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and somebody asked me for 1/2 of the 12 eggs, I'm going to look at the bottom and say, well, the 2 here is telling me take this bundle of eggs and break it into 2 groups. So I'm going to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here's 6 eggs, here's 6 eggs. There, right there, are my 2 groups. That 2 is this 2 on the bottom of the fraction. The 1 on the top of the fraction is saying, now give me just one of those groups. So it's saying, just give me this group right here. Not both groups, just one. So that's how I can come up and say, well, then 1/2 of 12 must be 6, because I took the 12, broke it into 2 parts, and I took one of those 2 parts. Okay. Here's another question on a sticky. Now, I started with the 1/2 because without even doing the kind of thinking we just did back here of what does the bottom tell me, what does the top tell me. Most people can quickly cut something in half, and the way they'll do that is dividing by 2. So here I've got a different question. I have 12 eggs, that stays the same. I have used 1/3 of them. How many did I use? So again, this is talking about a fraction of some number. Again, I could say, well, I see a fraction of, go ahead and multiply, you'll get your answer. But I want to go deeper than that, because if we think more deeply and use our deep understanding of a fraction, this idea is going to be remembered far longer than a simple little ruler trick. So, and you'll be able to apply it to so many other things. So let's go back to the 1/3 and say, what does that 1/3 mean? So the 3 on the bottom, well, we know that the bottom says the number of parts in one whole. What's the whole in this case? Well, this is the whole bundle of eggs, the whole bunch of eggs, 12. So I'm going to take my 12 eggs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and the 3 on the bottom says break that into 3 groups. Well, okay, so if I'm going to break it into 3 groups, then quickly I could do what's 12 broken into 3 groups. The answer is 4 in each group. So there's 4 eggs in the first group, 4 eggs in the second group, 4 eggs in the third group. 4 and 4 and 4. Now I go back and I've done what the 3 on the bottom has told me. Take your whole, take the thing that you're, the amount that you're working with, the whole amount that you're working with, break it into 3 parts. Now I'm going to use the top, and the top says, now give me one of those groups. One of those groups. So that means I am just going to grab one of these groups. So that tells me that 1/3 of 12 is just one group of 4. All right. 4. Now, one of the things I should always remember to do is when I write down a number for an answer, also write down the word that goes with it. The number by itself doesn't mean anything. It can count something, but I've got no idea what I'm counting until I put the word eggs behind it. Now the answer is complete. I've changed the question again. I've got 12 eggs. I used 2/3 of them. How many did I use? Maybe you can see what I've changed here now. The 12 eggs stays the same. I'm still talking about thirds. The last slide was talking about 1/3. This is 2/3. So I'm still talking about thirds. But the difference is, over here I was talking about 1/3 of the eggs. Now I'm talking about 2/3 of the eggs. So we're talking about 2/3 of 12 eggs. Let's go back to our fraction basics again to help us with this. What does the 3 on the bottom tell me? The 3 on the bottom tells me the number of parts in one whole. What's the whole in this question? Well, this is the whole amount of eggs. The whole amount of eggs is 12. So I want to take my 12 eggs and break that into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I know from before that when I take 12 and break it into 3 parts, every part has the size of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my 12 eggs broken into 3 groups of 4 in each. So I've done what the number 3 on the bottom is telling me to do. Now I go to the top. This is something we haven't seen yet. So far it's always had a 1 up there. Now there's a 2. Remember what the top tells me. It tells me the number of parts that I'm interested in or thinking about. So instead of just being interested in one part as we were in the past, now this 2 up here is saying, give me 2 of those parts. So if I'm getting 2 of the parts, each part has 4, 2 of the parts means now I've got 8. So 2/3 of 12 is 8 eggs. Now, it would make sense that if somebody asked me for 3/3 of 12, you would remember from the first series of videos that whenever we have a fraction with the top number and the bottom number the same, it's equal to the number 1, the whole thing. Remember, the bottom says, how many parts is the whole broken into? This fraction says the whole is broken into 3 parts. The top says, how many parts am I interested in? If the top says the same number, it says I'm interested in every single one of those parts in the whole, which means I've got 1 whole. So 3/3 of 12 means give me the whole 12. The answer to that would be 12 whole eggs. So I'm hoping that you'll notice now that whenever I've got a fraction or a question that asks for a fraction of an amount, that rather than relying on a rule that I could easily forget, if I go back to my basic understanding of fractions, that the bottom tells me how many parts in a whole, the top tells me how many parts I'm interested in, that any fraction somebody gives me, I can figure it out now. 3/7 of 21. Oh, the bottom says 7, so I'm going to break the 21 into 7 groups. Well, 21 broken into 7 groups means 3 in each group. So I could make 21 dots here. I don't know how many I've got, and then start breaking them into groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to end up with 7 different groups. Every one of them has got 3 in it. Altogether it's 21. Then I go to the top. How many of these groups do I want? The top number tells me I don't want just 1 group. I don't want just 2 groups. I want 3 groups. Well, 3 groups of 3 means I've got 9 here. So 3/7 of 21 must give me the answer 9. There you go. If that makes sense, then go ahead and work away on some questions. If you're still wondering about how this works, maybe go back and watch the video again. And I hope this helps.